Well, hi everyone. Doing a little bit of a home shot tonight. Figured that we could get a video done with everything all ready to go. So let's give it a shot. So today is going to be September 29th, which is a Tuesday. And we've actually got a lot of changes that are coming today in class because we are introducing our first text, which I think does sound a little scary at first. You are getting a textbook, kind of. And we'll go through what that is and how you're going to access it and how you're going to keep track of it, which I think is going to be way easier than what we would have done if we had normal school. So we'll see how that goes. But first, let's kind of go back to yesterday, move to today, and see where we're going to go from there. So yesterday we talked about landforms. And we went through a bunch of different ones. Kind of touched on a few areas, but what we ended up doing was we stopped with erosion and what happens when wind and water end up breaking away a mountain or some sort of landform. And it's kind of like a destruction, right? Well, basically, this next week, or the rest of this week anyway, we're going to be looking at when Earth is destroyed, or parts of the Earth are destroyed and are uninhabitable because of climate. And what we're really going to focus on are world deserts. So we are going to hop into a little PowerPoint, get us ready, get our mind wrapped around what a desert is, where they are, and why we're studying them, okay? So that being said, we are going to move over to Google Classroom. Okay. I'm gonna move myself up here. I always think that I'm gonna be shown on here, so let's see. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But let's go over to Google Classroom. And today's September 29th, your warm-up. We discussed geographical landforms. I'd like you to pick one landform you would like to live near or in and explain why. So you should be using yesterday, but it's still your opinion, right? Okay. So let's hop into it here. We're talking about world deserts. So what is a desert, right? And it's something that if I told you what it was, or if I brought it up to you, you would instantly have a picture in your head, right? But just like with anything that we categorize or give a name to, like a lake, for example, there are certain criteria that it has to meet in order to actually be considered something of that variety. So for a desert, they're going to be dry places that get very little precipitation. Okay, now precipitation is anything that comes out of the sky. Rain, snow, hail, sleet. I think that's it. Acid rain. Right, but anything that falls out of the sky is considered precipitation. So a desert is a place that gets less than 10 inches a year. Obviously, most of the time when you think of a desert, you think of a super, super hot, dry place, right? And one of the places that we're going to focus on when we get into the deserts of Africa is talking about the Sahara Desert. That's usually the most commonly referred to because it's the most extreme and one of the biggest, if not the biggest. But actually, that is not the only way that you can get a desert. Deserts don't have to be hot, right? All they have to be is dry. There are a whole bunch of places that are super, super cold that are considered desert because they hardly get any precipitation. They get less than 10 inches a year. An example is Siberia, which is in Russia. That was the place that they used to send prisoners to go to work camps because it was such a horrible place that they knew that they would never make it back once they went there, right? North Pole, right? There's all those glaciers up there, and in a lot of cases, there's very little precipitation up there. And there's far northern Russia, but I am actually going to change that right now because that bothers me. I meant to, because that is Siberia. I actually meant farther north Canada. So when you get to 8th grade, we are going to read Call of the Wild, which is a pursuit of a man who wants to go up to this part of northern Canada. Well, why would you do that? Because it's a cold desert. Well, there was a rumor of gold up there, and he wanted to go and see if he could find it. All right, it's a great story. Jack London, great author, one of my all-time favorites. Remember this saying, it might be important for your exit ticket. You can have a cold desert, but you can never have a wet desert, right? It can be hot or cold. But the one thing that's non-negotiable, deserts have to be dry. So these are just some of the world deserts, the largest ones. You can see we really have them on basically all continents, right? Ironically, the only continent that's shown on here that isn't shown on here really is a whole desert itself. I mean, Antarctica is this massive, massive ice sheet that hardly ever gets any precipitation at all. So it is a weird graphic in that it doesn't show probably the biggest desert of all, which is Antarctica. All right, so just a couple of characteristics about what is in a desert and what they're like. The soil is going to have very little moisture in it, right? Well, it's dry, so that makes sense. But in a lot of cases, especially in hot deserts, you're going to see the soil being very loose. And for the most part, it's going to be covered in sand, right? So if you try to pick up a handful of dirt out of the ground, you might get some blades of grass, but it's pretty hard to actually grab a fistful of like ground and pull it up, right? Loose soil's not like that. If you even go to a beach is a good example. You could grab a fistful of sand, hold it up in your hand, no problem. And when these places finally do have rain, usually the storms are very violent, and they're going to cause what's called flash floods. Now, I can tell you what this is. You know, it's a lot of rain that hits this loose soil, this sand, and then when it does it, it washes away. But I actually found this quick video of a news clip where there was a huge flash flood in Arizona, and it's pretty darn interesting. So I think just showing you how destructive they can be really puts a better face on it. So let's go ahead with that.
A wall of mud and debris tore through the Arizona desert today. Some folks had to jump out of its path and barely escaped. The flash floods are the result of runoff from storms in what is becoming a violent monsoon season. Carter Evans is following the breaking news.
It's a view of a flash flood that's rarely seen.
Let's get out of the way.
Just outside the town of Mayer, Arizona, north of Phoenix.
So you can see that's all dirt and sand that's been picked up by a large amount of water that probably came through because of a storm. And it's just like a tidal wave. It's almost like a tsunami. It's just ripping through everything in sight.
Came a wall of water, mud.
You can see it's going towards that structure here.
Scrambled as the flood wiped out their gear.
And it completely just tears it apart. That's how strong the water is.
The flooding came as a surprise to people who were enjoying a bright
trees and
sunny
bushes
day.
in it.
It came a day after this flash flood that struck Southern California with a vengeance.
Right now, very serious situation out here in the Acton area. As
mud wiped out part of a railroad track in Acton, California. This woman.
Yeah, so that's flash floods. Also, when you see it, water's going to turn into vapor. Any water that's in the air anyway, it turns into vapor faster than it can be replaced. So usually over time, deserts, as they continue to suck more and more moisture out and put less and less in, they become more and more extreme. It's really hard for plants and animals to live there, right? I mean, one of the basic needs of both of those things is water, and there isn't much of it. But that doesn't mean that people and plants and animals can't, right? And a great example is the city of Las Vegas. They built this huge burgeoning city that people want to go to like as a vacation spot year round. So people can do it, and animals and plants can do it. But as we're going to see, they're going to have a little bit of a change, whether it's in mindset or even physically, to make it in those conditions. Oh, interesting. There. So we call this adaptation, right? To survive in a situation, you must adapt. Just like many of you have had to adapt to this new system of school, right? You are taking a situation, you understand that you have a struggle, and you make a change to try to survive it. Now, in a lot of cases, this happens over time, and these plants or animals, they physically change. So it's a little bit different than the short term, but it's the same idea. So in a lot of cases, deserts are really hot or really cold. right? Cold deserts are going to be covered with ice and not hard or hard ground and not sand. So it's pretty hard for anything to grow there. But a lot of times there are small bushes and things that can make it. Death Valley, California has the hottest temperature ever recorded. You're going to want to know what that record is for your exit ticket. So make sure that you do your book for that. And a lot of species can't survive like in a place like Death Valley. It's just unbearable. It's way over your average body temperature. And it sucks so much moisture out of your body. It's almost impossible. There are people that live there, but they're tough ones. But there are plants and animals that have found a way to do it. And a great example here is this guy, the saguaro cactus. Now, this is one of the biggest, it is the biggest cactus that naturally occurs in North America. But as you can see, it's got this green, mushy structure to it, and it's almost like a sponge. And over time, it's found a way to suck any moisture out of the ground, and it keeps it inside of its body, or inside of its trunk for a cactus, I guess. But it keeps it inside so that it allows it to continue to go very long periods without water and still survive. They're all over the place out in the Southwest. I've seen a couple of them when I went to go visit my aunt and uncle in California. We drove through, we got to see part of Arizona, and they are massive. I mean, these things, they look like almost full-grown trees that you would just see outside. It's pretty neat. And this little guy is really interesting. So he is one of our North American friends that's out in the Sonora Desert. This is a kangaroo rat, and it actually can go an entire lifetime without having a sip of water. Now, of course, it has water in it. It is alive. But it actually built what's like a filtration system where the water in its body will filter out any of the bad chemicals, and it'll secrete, or those waste products that we would usually call urine, comes out in a crystal form. It comes out as a solid, so it doesn't expel any actual fluids when it gets rid of that uric acid. So it's like a built-in filter without ever having to have a sip of water in their lifetime. That's incredible. Just amazing that an animal could somehow find a way over time to be able to change like that. All right, so why spend time on deserts? Well, first of all, they cover about 20% of the earth, right? So that is a very large amount of the planet, and we're studying world history. So we need to familiarize ourselves with that 20%, right? We would ideally like to get 100. And one of the other reasons is that people are contributing to deserts expanding, right? Because as the world temperature continues to rise, so does the land that already was uninhabitable. It's going to have even more extreme temperatures, so it continues to expand. It's a very similar idea to the polar ice caps melting, and because of that, water's melting and it's causing sea levels to rise. And people have learned to live in them, and we're going to talk about a few groups of them, and I think it shows, number one, how people adapt, but number two, it gives us some exposure to groups of people that we may not have studied had it not been for them living in these deserts, which I think is really neat. And then lastly, basically each world continent has a desert. So we're going to be able to cover basically geographically the entire world, which is really cool. Except for Antarctica, which I'm just going to talk about right now. It is a massive desert, but there's just so little human culture there. It is very difficult for us to go into it in depth. Oh, and this is a YouTube video. I'm going to leave it on here. I think I'm going to skip it. I wanted to watch it, but it's really neat. It actually shows how the Sahara Desert in Africa, how it went from, at one time it was very green, to now it is like one of the most uninhabitable places on Earth. And scientists are predicting that it's going to end up turning green again sometime in the future because they think of it like a cycle. So it'd be pretty neat. I don't think it happened in our lifetime, though. Okay, so the moment of truth, your textbook. So you have, or I have, downloaded an electric copy of this textbook, okay? So you're not going to have to worry about losing it. As long as you have access to Google Classroom, you will be able to use this textbook, okay? Now, when we go to Google Classroom in a second, we'll take a look at it. This was the original book, and I know it's probably kind of hard to see, but it's not even the width of my nose, okay? it's pretty small. So we're not going to use it for very long. We're going to cover some points of the reading every day, but the exit tickets are designed that you will not be able to complete them without reading the text. Okay. Now I might give you some clues onto where they are, but you're going to have to find them yourself. Okay. That's just to hold you accountable. And I hope that makes sense. So before we go to this, let's hop over to Google Classroom and let's take a look at where you can find this book. Okay. So we have right here, I'm going to keep this on the top topic all week. So when you log into Google Classroom this whole week, you're going to see this Desert Online textbook at the top. You're going to click the link, and then I have it downloaded right here. It says World Deserts Textbook. Okay. Now, I think this alone should be good for when you finally get into it. Okay. So if you need to, you can hit, I believe, yeah, the plus button will zoom it in so that you can get a really good view of what you're reading. This is a really colorful textbook with a lot of cool images, and honestly, I just think very, very engaging overall. So I think you might actually enjoy this more than you think. But here's the deal, like for your next reading, it's going to be pages 2 through 11. Sounds like a lot, but once again, this right here is an entire page of text, right? And when you look for your page numbers, look over here, you can see them. They're down in the bottom corner. Don't pay attention to this right here when you're scaling through. Don't pay attention to that. That's showing all of the pages that are electronically in there. I want you to follow these numbers that are at the bottom of the pages, okay? So you're going to read 2 through 11 right here. It's an awesome picture of the Sahara Desert, but look at that, no text. Here's another one, right? So you're going to go through, and I want you to actually read page 11. Don't stop. And you'll know that you're on the right page. Oh, come on. We can do better than that. There we go. You'll know you're on the right page because you'll get to a different chapter. So I'm just going to let it sit here. This might happen for you, right? You might scroll for a second. It might, freeze up for a second. Just give it a second. It'll load. So this will be the last page that you'll read. Okay. So we're going to do 2 through 11 for tomorrow. And I have it posted on the link what you need to do every day, but we'll also talk about it in the videos and also when you're in class, right? So that's all I've got for you. I do want to let you go because this was a longer video to teach you how to access the textbook. Just really quickly, let's go to the exit ticket. Okay, there are lots of types of deserts all over planet Earth. They are in different locations, climates, and regions. There are so many differences in the world's deserts, but they all have one trait. What is it? This will be answered in the reading and video multiple times. So we said that you can have a hot desert, you can have a cold one, but you can't have a what desert? All right. That being said, I'll let you go. Have yourselves a good rest of your day and evening, and we will see you bright and early, hopefully, tomorrow.